In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Please be seated. And who is my neighbor? It seems that every time one reads or watches the news lately, the expression Good Samaritan is on the lips of almost every reporter covering yet another tragedy. Mass shootings have become a common occurrence, and the Highland Park 4th of July shooting happened as I was reflecting on this passage we are given in Luke's Gospel today. I was reflecting on the use of mercy in the text, and in Aramaic, the language Jesus would have been speaking as he taught his lesson with this parable. Yes, it was written in Koine Greek, but he would have been speaking Aramaic when he shared this parable. Mercy comes from the same root as the word for womb. This is true in Hebrew as well. The sense of mercy in Aramaic is the loving kindness and care that parents share with their youngest and most vulnerable children. So it isn't hard to imagine that, of course, I began to think about Aiden. Aiden was the 2-year-old boy pulled from beneath his father's dying body, covered in his father's blood. What Christian could be unmoved by such an image? For we too know that we have been loved enough, the children of God, to be covered in Jesus' blood. As the Good Samaritans on the scene continued their attempt to save Aiden's father, Aiden began to wander away and was scooped up by a young couple at the parade who noticed him. They immediately cared for him as they would have for their own young children. And Aiden has been restored to his grandparents' care, having lost both his father and mother in another incomprehensible and yet all too common tragedy. Dana and Greg Ring are the names of the young couple who responded with mercy to Aiden's deed, and they are rightly among the many Good Samaritans we honor that day who responded with generosity and compassion to the many who were suffering. But as I reflected more on the parable of the Good Samaritan, I realized that I was missing the twist. Every good parable has one. We often get lost in the story with the good deed. And frankly, I believe most humans are actually pretty good at responding to tragedy as Good Samaritans. We rush to aid without thinking to help a child or even an adult that we see as completely vulnerable. I take nothing away from the good to act so and the rightful heroism that many showed on that day. I just merely point out that I don't think that this behavior is strange in any way, and it wouldn't have been in Jesus' day either. In fact, that is the shock value of the parable, the twist, if you will, of Jesus' parable. Everyone should be willing to respond, and yet a priest walks by a fellow suffering Jew without a look back. The Levite, God's portion from among his people, also ignores the beaten, dying Jew. So what would the people expect next? Maybe some, who have perhaps already noticed the hypocrisy of their religious leaders, are expecting a fellow Jew just like them, a laborer, a farmer, a herdsman, or maybe even just a passing merchant. That Jew will do as the law commands. But then the twist. It is a stinking, nasty, traitorous, lying, worse than a Gentile Samaritan. There must have been gasps when Jesus first told this parable. I am sure the lawyer, who after all was being a bit smug in this story, was in shock. Some may have walked away or even cursed Jesus for this strange twist to his story. And it was in that I was reminded that Jesus is the surgeon of our souls. He cuts away all hypocrisy and blindness. He will restore our sight one way or another. It hurts. But if we will only accept this medical intervention, it is a hurt for our benefit, to heal us and through us, even our society we are a part of. So I knew as I continued to reflect that Jesus wasn't done with how I was looking, not only at the story of the Good Samaritan, the parable, but the tragedy at Highland Park. There was another tragedy that unfolded at Highland Park. The young man accused of this horrendous crime, Bobby Creamer, seemed to be yet another young man we ignored. These shooters are always young men, withdrawn, quiet, alone, traumatized by violence in their childhood, and now incapable of distinguishing between their violent fantasies and reality. We have known these facts for years now. Their families have either given up or don't know how to help them. And we have ignored them at our peril. After all, he was once a little Aiden too. I was cut to the heart when I read that one of his elementary teachers helping with an after-school program shared that he was always the last one to be picked on. As a high school educator, I was shocked and dismayed to hear he dropped after the 9th grade. And no one seems to know whether he ever returned to school. No one seems to have ever looked after him. I do not excuse his crime. And if found guilty, he will be punished. But that won't bring back any of the victims. And it won't bring back Aiden's parents. And so I asked myself, why? Why does this keep happening? What are we missing? We have known some common sense approaches to this problem for years, and we continue to ignore. And the problem seems to be accelerating, not diminishing. Maybe the real lesson of the parable of the Good Samaritan is not the good deed. Maybe the lesson we need to hear is beware who we ignore, who we don't care about, who we have given up on, who we hate. Who, in other words, are our Samaritans? They are a part of us and should be binding up wounds, not causing them. It was the one who showed him mercy. Go and do likewise.